General Hospital spoilers reveal that a growing darkness is beginning to suffocate Sasha Gilmore Corbin. One rooted in the chilling realization that her daughter Daisy may now be caught in the crosshairs of something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. What began as a quiet concern, just a mother's natural instinct to protect, has now mutated into a full-blown obsession, as every hour brings new signs that the world around Daisy is no longer safe. The air around Sasha feels heavier, more fragile, as if something unseen and malevolent is creeping closer, tightening its grip on both their lives. Every knock on the door, every phone call from an unknown number, every glance from a stranger now carries the potential weight of threat. And through it all, Sasha is crumbling. What's terrifying is that this isn't just fear, it's becoming an emotional and psychological unraveling, a slow descent into a state of constant vigilance that offers no peace. Sasha has endured unimaginable pain in the past, but this is different. This is her child. And the stakes are no longer about grief or healing, they're about survival. She no longer trusts the safety of daylight or the promise of silence. Her maternal instincts are now corrupted by paranoia, twisted by dread, and haunted by the suspicion that someone is targeting Daisy. Whispers have already begun to circulate in Port Charles, rumors that Sasha has been seen watching Daisy's daycare from the shadows, or calling Michael at all hours to double-check who's picking up their daughter. Some have brushed it off as maternal protectiveness, but those who know her best, like Carly, Brooke Lynn, and even Maxie, are starting to see something more unhinged beneath the surface. Sasha can't sleep. She can't focus. Every time Daisy cries, she hears echoes of loss, the kind of echo she once heard when Liam died. Her hands tremble when she holds her daughter, not from weakness, but from the unshakable fear that she might not be able to keep Daisy safe. She's begun avoiding the park, avoiding crowded places, and even avoiding her friends. To her, any environment could become a threat. Every smiling face could be a facade. Every kindly stranger could be a kidnapper in disguise. And yet, the tragedy isn't just in Sasha's fear, it's in her growing inability to distinguish what's real. She's seeing danger where there may be none, isolating herself from those who want to help. If anyone suggests that she might be spiraling, she lashes out, convinced they're underestimating the threat, or worse, that they're part of it. In a heartbreaking turn, even Michael, once her partner in parenting and a quiet source of strength, has begun to express concern that Sasha is losing control. But for Sasha, Michael's doubts feel like betrayal. Another reason not to trust anyone. What makes it all the more devastating is the sense that this didn't come out of nowhere. Sasha has tried so hard to rebuild after the storm that took everything from her, her husband, her child, her sense of self. She believed that Daisy was her second chance at life. A living promise that hope could rise from devastation. But now that promise is being threatened, and the fragile foundation Sasha built is cracking beneath her feet. If she loses Daisy, or even believes she might, there may be no coming back. She is already preparing for war, though no one else knows it. Her internet search history is filled with self-defense courses, home surveillance systems, private investigators, and background checks on people around Daisy. She's refusing to let babysitters or daycare workers out of her sight. She's even begun documenting strange cars parked too long on her street. Her home is slowly transforming into a fortress. But inside its walls is a mother unraveling in silence. If this continues, if no one can reach her in time, Sasha may push away every person who loves her. She may sabotage the very relationships that could keep her grounded. And in the most chilling possibility of all, she may walk into danger headfirst, believing that only she can eliminate the threat. The irony, of course, is that her desperate attempts to protect Daisy could end up exposing them both to even greater harm. Because in the world of Port Charles, where secrets and threats often wear friendly faces, sometimes the greatest danger comes from within. Sasha's descent into obsession is no longer a quiet subplot, it's becoming a central storm. And if no one stops it, it could shatter more than just her family. It could bring her to the edge of everything she's fought so hard to survive. The question now is, Can anyone pull her back before she crosses the line, and takes Daisy with her? Willow's decision to bring Sasha back into the heart of the chaos wasn't just a moment of blurred judgment or blind faith. It was a thunderous pivot in a storm that had already begun to consume her from the inside. Long before Sasha's heroism, long before the sirens screamed through the streets of Port Charles on the night Daisy was saved, there had been cracks forming in the foundation of Willow's carefully curated life. She had convinced herself that love could survive betrayal, that motherhood could transcend bitterness. That redemption was something she could orchestrate, even if it meant inviting her greatest rival back into the fold. But when the dust settled and Sasha was found unconscious, bruised and bleeding after throwing herself between Daisy and danger, everything changed. In that single, searing moment, Sasha became something else entirely, a martyr to a child not biologically hers, a wounded protector, a mother figure who acted when no one else could. And suddenly, everything Willow thought she could control unraveled. Because despite every calculated move, despite every whispered conversation with Martin and Drew, despite the growing distance between her and Michael, the woman she had once vowed to destroy had become the very person Port Charles now rallied behind. And Willow, left standing alone in the hallway of General Hospital, was no longer a grieving mother or a scorned ex-wife. She was a shadow of herself. Someone whose choices now carried the bitter weight of suspicion, blame, and irreversible consequence. Michael, once torn between two versions of love, now stood quietly at Sasha's bedside, holding her hand, whispering promises she couldn't yet hear. His eyes, once so clouded by loyalty and confusion, now burned with clarity. Sasha had saved their daughter. Sasha had become the unwavering force of sacrifice and love that Willow had once been, long ago, before everything twisted. And now, Michael was faced with a truth he couldn't ignore. That perhaps the woman he was supposed to leave behind had always been the one willing to die for his child. But what haunts everyone now is the silence. Sasha's coma is more than medical, it's metaphorical. She is the living embodiment of everything left unsaid, of apologies never made, of trust broken and impossible to mend. Port Charles walks its streets with the hush of uncertainty draped over every corner. Carly, who once clashed violently with Sasha, now visits her vigilantly. Brooklyn can't stop crying. Sunny, eyes narrowed and fists clenched, begins asking questions no one dares answer. Who allowed this? Who was responsible for bringing Sasha into danger? Why was Daisy even in that position in the first place? And the answers, however quietly, lead back to Willow. There is no denying that her decision set these wheels in motion. Whether motivated by guilt, delusion, or some twisted notion of rewriting her narrative, Willow invited chaos back into their lives. Her story, once drenched in tragedy and sympathy, now reads like a cautionary tale, a mother whose need for control and validation outweighed her ability to see the truth. She speaks now with rehearsed calm, explaining to those who'll listen that Sasha's return was necessary, that Daisy needed all the love she could get. But her voice is met with cold stares, with whispered questions, with growing suspicion. And yet, the story isn't only about Willow's unraveling. It's about Sasha's rise, even in silence. It's about the way Port Charles redefines itself in the wake of near tragedy. It's about how people see Sasha now, not as the troubled woman with a complicated past, but as a mother in spirit, a protector in instinct. The town gathers outside her hospital room, leaving flowers, praying, hoping. Daisy, too young to understand the gravity of what's happened, still reaches for the stuffed bear Sasha gave her and smiles when she hears her name whispered in hope. Michael reads bedtime stories aloud even though Sasha can't respond. And in those moments, something shifts. Sasha has become a symbol now. And Willow? She has become a caution. The consequences are not limited to guilt or suspicion, they are practical, painful, and permanent. Lawyers begin drawing up new custody agreements. Michael, with the legal right to care for Daisy if Sasha doesn't recover, begins preparing emotionally for that role. Carly supports him with a watchful eye on Willow, whose behavior grows more erratic by the day. She claims exhaustion, but others see the storm churning just beneath her skin. The woman who once clung so tightly to the idea of motherhood is now faced with a future where she may no longer have a place in the lives of the very children she fought so hard to keep. And it is this looming reality that fuels the darkness inside her. Because Willow can't escape the realization that she has become what she feared most, a mother pushed aside, not by the courts. Not by her illness, but by her own actions. She watches Michael's face as he looks at Sasha and sees something she no longer recognizes, love not tinged with obligation, but with admiration. And that realization gnaws at her, deep and unrelenting. Sasha, silent and broken in a hospital bed, is still more powerful than Willow can ever be again. And in this downward spiral, Willow begins to imagine possibilities no one wants to admit. What if Sasha never wakes up? What if this accident removes her from the equation entirely? What if, after everything, Willow could reclaim what she believes was stolen from her? But then comes the final blow, the one she hadn't prepared for. Daisy, from her bed at Michael's house, asks for Sasha. Not Willow. Not Mommy. But Sasha. The woman who saved her. The woman who would die for her. And Michael, eyes brimming with emotion, doesn't correct her. He simply holds her close. In that moment, Willow breaks. This isn't just the story of a rivalry or a custody battle. This is the story of a mother who lost herself, a woman who gambled with redemption and lost. This is the story of how love, sacrifice, and silence rewrote the fate of a family. And this is only the beginning. Because when, and if, Sasha opens her eyes again, she may awaken to a world where she is beloved, where Michael is hers. Where Daisy calls her mother, and where Willow is no longer welcome. And in that moment, everything will truly change. Michael will officially become Daisy's guardian. But beneath the legal signatures and gentle reassurances lies a story soaked in sorrow, mirroring a haunting path Port Charles has walked before. Just as Lulu Spencer was once thrust into an irreversible silence, her voice stolen, her presence frozen in time, so too now does Sasha Gilmore Corbin seem to slip beyond reach. Her vibrant spirit stilled by the devastating trauma she endured. The halls of General Hospital once again echo with a familiar kind of pain. The kind that doesn't scream but lingers, whispers of, what if, of lives halted mid-sentence, of futures rewritten in cold, sterile silence. For Michael, the weight of guardianship over Daisy is both a responsibility and a revelation. The little girl looks at him now not just as a biological father but as the only parent she can see, touch, and hear. Yet even as Michael reads to her at night, even as he brushes her hair back gently and promises her that Mommy will be okay, he cannot ignore the truth growing louder in the quiet. Sasha might never wake up. His heart aches in ways he cannot articulate. This wasn't how their reunion was meant to unfold. They had overcome so much, lies, addiction, grief, betrayal, only to find peace for a fleeting moment before tragedy struck again. Carly watches from a distance, trying not to interfere, trying not to let her overprotective instincts take over again. She sees the shadows under Michael's eyes, the way he stays up late into the night beside Sasha's bed, begging her silently to fight, to return to them. But every beep of the monitors, every day without a flicker of recognition in Sasha's still face, makes the comparison to Lulu more chilling. Port Charles remembers what it felt like to wait for someone who never woke up. And now, the fear is that Michael may be waiting in vain. For Sasha, the battle is invisible but fierce. If she is locked in a dream, or worse, nothingness, her spirit must be raging against the stillness. She fought so hard to reclaim her life, to protect Daisy, to build something real with Michael again. That she could be taken away now, after finally finding her way back. Feels like the cruelest twist fate could deliver. And yet, it is happening. Brooke Lynn cries every time she visits. Maxie holds Sasha's hand and prays. Sunny sits in silence and watches over Michael. And even Nina, now softened by regret, leaves flowers in the hope that forgiveness will bloom with healing. But it's Willow's reaction that sends ripples through the fabric of the town. Once ready to destroy Sasha, now she stands outside Sasha's hospital room, looking in through the glass, haunted. Because deep down, she knows, if Sasha never wakes, she'll be the mother in Daisy's life by default. Not by love, not by grace, but by absence. But it's not what she wanted anymore. Not like this. The grief that hangs in the air is thick. Port Charles is used to drama, to fire, to betrayal. But this quiet kind of sorrow, is harder. There are no villains here, no explosive confrontations or cunning plots. Only silence. Only waiting. Only hope stretching thin. And as Michael signs papers to make his guardianship over Daisy official, his hand trembles. Because this isn't a victory. It's a vigil. Just as Dante once stood beside Lulu, year after year, telling her about their son and their life as if she could still hear him. So too does Michael now find himself recounting Daisy's milestones to Sasha, her first steps, her new favorite book, the way she says, "I love you," now without being prompted. He prays that something in Sasha's mind is listening, that her soul is holding on. But no one knows how this story ends. And as the days pass, and Daisy begins to grow into her father's arms, Sasha's body remains still, her presence both absent and ever-present. A mother without motion. A warrior trapped in stasis. A love story unfinished. Michael is her guardian now. But he never wanted to be her replacement. He just wanted to be enough until Sasha came home. And now, the entire town wonders, will she? Or has Port Charles lost another of its brightest souls to the cruel silence that sometimes claims the strongest of hearts? Under the weight of growing threats, secrets, and betrayals that have eroded the very foundation of the Corinthos and Quartermain legacies, Michael and Jason are now walking side by side. No longer separated by moral boundaries or conflicted loyalties. What once was a quiet bond forged in blood and family obligation has evolved into an unshakable alliance grounded in purpose, fury, and an almost primal instinct to protect what little remains of their broken world. The moment Sasha fell into a coma, her body torn between survival and surrender. And Daisy's safety was threatened by shadows that no longer hid in whispers but now loomed in every corner of Port Charles. Something changed in Michael. The young man who once believed in courts, custody, and compromise was gone. What remained was a father reborn in anguish, molded by the fire of loss and betrayal. And now galvanized by the silent strength of the one man who had always fought in the dark when justice refused to emerge into the light, Jason. Their unity is not just reactionary. It is surgical. Every step they take is laced with calculation and cold focus. It begins quietly. With Jason reopening old connections and returning to his former self, not the domesticated version who once tried to run from the blood-stained shadows, but the enforcer who moved like smoke through the underworld, who struck before his enemies even realized they were exposed. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't need to. All he needs is Michael's nod, the unspoken signal that this war is not just about revenge, it's about reclaiming control, destroying the cancer that has festered too long beneath the city's surface. Michael, meanwhile, evolves into something more dangerous than grief. His pain doesn't make him weak, it sharpens him. The loss of control over Sasha's fate. The knowledge that Daisy was nearly taken from him by forces still hiding in plain sight, transforms him into a strategist no one saw coming. He begins tracing every thread. From hospital security logs to WSB files hidden beneath layers of diplomatic immunity. He pulls favors. He invokes fear. And as the pieces fall into place, he sees what Jason already suspected. This was never about one isolated threat. This was systemic. This was orchestrated. Someone wanted Sasha removed. Someone wanted Daisy vulnerable. And the names circling that objective list were familiar. Drew, with his manipulative grip on institutional power. Willow, increasingly erratic and mentally fractured. Possibly more involved than anyone dared to admit, and in the distance, the echo of Cassadine influence still contaminating the city like rot beneath a perfect surface. The more they uncover, the more vicious their tactics become. Michael begins confronting hospital board members, cloaked behind cordial smiles and false sympathy, exposing their negligence in Sasha's care. Jason infiltrates encrypted communication channels, discovering that Daisy's attempted kidnapping may have been authorized or at least tolerated by someone with WSB clearance. The revelation that Drew once held access to that clearance, thanks to his implanted memories and residual connections, sends Michael into a tailspin. Drew was not just negligent. He was complicit. Maybe not directly, but certainly in the systemic failure that left Sasha unprotected. Meanwhile, Willow becomes a wild card, her connection to Martin and Drew growing murkier. Jason suspects that Willow's passive grief may be masking something darker, perhaps even a psychological break that she has yet to reveal. Michael, for all his former love for her, now watches her like a stranger. He no longer sees the mother of his children, he sees someone whose silence has become too convenient. Carly senses it too. The tension tightening around her family pulls her deeper into Jason and Michael's orbit. She doesn't interfere. Not this time. She watches, calculating, knowing that any wrong move could push her son past the point of no return. But she supports it. Because for all her flaws, Carly understands one thing better than anyone: family does not beg for mercy. It takes back what it loses. Ruthlessly. Quietly. Permanently. As Sasha lies motionless in her hospital bed, unaware of the war ignited in her name, Jason and Michael begin dismantling the opposition. They corner Martin in his own web of legal technicalities, forcing him to admit to drafting guardianship documents that heavily favored Drew, even before Sasha's collapse. They trace a network of financial diversions linked to Nina, transactions meant to fund a private investigator who may have played a role in Sasha's surveillance. And through it all, they circle back to the WSB. Jack Brennan, long thought to be out of play, resurfaces as a ghost in encrypted communiques. Jason believes Brennan may have authorized Vaughn to observe the Corinthos family for reasons still undisclosed. That surveillance, initially believed to be passive, may have created an information leak that made Daisy a target. Jocelyn's involvement is another complication. Michael can't afford to alienate his sister. But Jason knows full well that WSB operatives, even unwitting ones, are rarely without blood on their hands. The rage Michael feels becomes volcanic when he uncovers that Sasha requested additional hospital security the night before her collapse, but Drew overrode it, citing lack of threat evidence. It was the same night Daisy cried out in her sleep about the man with the silver voice, a detail no one thought relevant, except Jason. Jason remembers a Cassadine operative known for vocal manipulation, someone presumed dead but whose voice once cracked codes and minds alike. If he's back, if he's after Daisy, then the target isn't just Sasha, it's the future of the Corinthos name. Now, with Sasha incapacitated and Daisy's safety hanging by a thread, Jason and Michael begin to isolate every potential enemy. Drew is cornered with legal threats and social exile. Nina is monitored every second. Willow is observed through shared custody exchanges, her every move documented, analyzed. Even Valentine, once a shadowy ally, is approached with a warning: help, or disappear. Their alliance becomes the center of gravity in Port Charles. Every power broker takes notice. Sonny, from his tenuous perch of fading influence, remains silent, but not ignorant. He knows this battle was coming. He once fought his wars with Jason. Now, he watches his son take up the sword. And he knows that this war will not end with peace. It will end with surrender, or ruin. The city trembles, even if it doesn't realize why. For behind the hospital walls and beneath the gilded estates of the powerful, something ancient and ruthless has returned, not just Jason Morgan, but the full force of the Corinthos' instinct to protect and annihilate. Michael has stopped being the bridge between two worlds. Now, he is the fire that burns them both down. Sasha's silence has become a battle cry. And every move from here on out is war.